All right. Well, welcome everyone. We are so thrilled that you have joined us today on this lovely Friday, May 3rd, which I just can't believe that we're already into May. I'm so thrilled to be joined with by Jessica Whittier. Jessica is a college access counselor at FAME, and we've not done a financial check-in together. So I'm really excited to partner up and be able to spend some time with you today. This is actually the final financial check-in in our series this year. We do take a hiatus in June and July, and then we'll kick off again in August. So for those of you who join these sessions regularly, I can tell you that we will be featuring student loan repayment in August, and we've got a full year's worth of check-ins to share with you. So we'll be launching that new calendar in July, and we hope that you'll join us. I also want to add that we do record all of these sessions. So if you've not been able to join us throughout the year and you're curious about other workshops that we've offered, certainly those are available for viewing on our YouTube page. And we're always interested in feedback and ideas for future sessions. You'll be getting the link to the recording in the follow-up. You'll get a survey actually that we hope that you'll fill out that will give you an opportunity to provide suggestions for topics. So certainly feel free to let us know if you have tips and ideas and things that you want us to cover. For today's topic, we are once again going to focus on saving for education and separating fact from myth. I think Jessica can attest to the fact that we are still hearing from families and parents and folks out in the community who still, despite all of our efforts to debunk myths, still are concerned about the impact of savings on financial aid. So the whole point of this presentation is to really debunk some of those myths, to really actually show you the impact of savings with some calculations rather than just tell you and expect that you'll trust that. We're actually going to show you the calculations so you can get a sense of how that's going to work. Not the actual calculations, but the outcome of the calculations. So real quickly, just want to go over, for those of you, I know many of you have probably joined our financial check-ins before and you're very, very familiar with FAME. But as always, we just like to mention who we are. We're a quasi-independent state agency that we are working to provide financial solutions to both Maine businesses and Maine people as they reach and seek out higher education beyond high school, education, training, multiple pathways. Jessica and I both serve as part of the college access and financial education team. I serve on the financial education side as financial education program manager. And as I said, Jessica is a college access counselor. She is all over the place helping students with families get that FAFSA completed, get the FAFSA corrected, and providing all of that one-on-one counseling. So thank you for being here, Jess. I know it's a super busy time of year.
It is. I'm very excited to be here.
So in today's agenda, Jess is actually going to kick us off with saving an overview of kind of saving and debunking some of those myths as we talked about. And then as always with our financial check-ins, we want to emphasize the importance of savings. And so I'll take over and give you sort of some information about making a plan for saving, ways to save, tips for saving. We've just wrapped up Financial Literacy Month, so of course we are always eager to embed, financial wellness tips, tools, and strategies that we have available through FAME. So most of the presentation is focused on saving for higher education and sort of the impact of savings, or no impact really. But then we will touch on saving strategies as well. So with that, Jessica, I'm going to turn it over to you, but I'll drive. So you let me know if I'm not moving the slides ahead appropriately, and just give me a next slide and I'll move it along.
Sure. Thanks, Mary. So I'm going to start by just talking a little bit about the financial aid process, just a little bit. So for those of you who have been out of touch for a little while, this year's financial aid process has been a bit more challenging than previous years, but we are getting through it. And so we've certainly had some changes. But the one thing that stays the same is the form is still the FAFSA. It is the free application for federal student aid. And that is going to be the form that is primarily used by every college in the United States to build financial aid packages for students. So, and that formula is primarily driven by income, specifically the income of the parents. But if you're an independent student, it could be your own income as well. When filling out that FAFSA form, the whole point of filling out the form is to get this SAI, your Student Aid Index Number. For those of you that have been around for a little while, we used to call that your expected family contribution, but it is now your Student Aid Index. And for a lot of families out there, that number is surprisingly higher than they expected it to be. So especially, I will say, for our middle and middle upper income families, those numbers they are seeing can be a bit shocking. And we're going to show you kind of what that's going to look like and give you an idea of how that might look for different families in different earning brackets. So ultimately, our goal is to say, you know, income plays a big role. Savings actually not such a big role in this process. And so every bit of money that a student saves or a family saves for college is going to help reduce their borrowing and certainly gives them more options. I'm working with lots of students right now who are looking at heading off to school and making those decisions. And it's tough when there is not savings there to help them cover some of those costs. Because then we're talking more about borrowing and working more hours, which all of those things make college a little bit more challenging for students. Next, there we go. All right, so just so that you have an idea of what this looks like. So in this scenario, we have got students that come from a family, or a student that comes from a family. And in this scenario, this is so two parents, or four people in the household. So ideally 2 parents and 2 kiddos, but it could be 1 parent and 3 kiddos, but 4 people in this household. Family A, with that four people in their household, makes $60,000 a year. Family B makes $80,000. Family C $100,000, and Family D $120,000 a year. So looking at this spreadsheet, in this scenario, these families have no assets, so they haven't saved anything. They have nothing that they're counting. Just based on income, we can see that a family of 4 that makes $60,000 a year is going to have an expected parent contribution from income of $1,007. When you move up $20,000 in income for that same family of 4, I should have done the calculations here already, but that's like what, 4 times. So we go up by a smaller percentage, but we go 4 times the contribution expected from families based on that income, and that number continues to grow. So our $100,000 family is looking at $9,000, and once you get up to $120,000, we're looking at $14,400 expected just based on that parent contribution. So we are definitely seeing the higher that parent income is, the more students are likely going to need to pay for college. I love one of the things that I will say, I talk about this in schools for financial aid nights all the time. So if you guys have been to one of my presentations, you've heard it already. The number one thing that a parent can do to help their students qualify for more financial aid for college is to quit your jobs. So the lower your income is, the better off your students will be when it comes to getting that financial aid. That table turns a little bit when we start looking at assets and college savings in particular. Certainly families that make $120,000 a year have more capacity to save, but we don't always think about it that way, right? So it may not feel like we are upper middle income families, so we're not saving as much, but every little bit counts. So I think the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about how if you save for college, it's not going to have as big of an impact as you think. So the myth is, if we save, our child's not going to get any financial aid. That's going to hurt us. So I'm not going to save for college because I don't want to hurt my kid's future, right? And that is absolutely the myth in this situation. So, in fact, parent assets play a super small role in this process for the vast majority of students. So, having some college savings, any college savings can definitely help. Having a healthy college savings can be a huge difference for those students and what options they have when it comes time for college. So, if you're wondering, well, that can't be, she's got to be crazy. I've heard this a million times that that definitely, if I save money, they're going to more I save, the more colleges are going to expect that I can pay. So here's how the FAFSA starts figuring these things out. First, in some scenarios, none of the assets that a family has will be counted at all. So for some families in Maine earning less than $60,000 a year, typically means that the savings that they have, their assets, are going to have no impact on their financial aid eligibility. So this happens again if your combined AGI, your adjusted gross income, again for a family of four typically, is $60,000 or less, and you didn't file one of the schedules, and your net and if you have a business that you've had less than or equal to $10,000 in income from that business, or, and this is the one we see in my scenario most often, is you've already qualified for one of the programs out there that is need tested. So that's going to be programs like federal programs like WIC and TANF, food stamps, federal housing assistance, free lunch at school, and not just free lunch because we live in Maine and everybody gets free lunch, but because of the federal programs that allow us to get free or reduced lunch. So if you already belong to one of those programs, Social Security, so if you're getting, Social Security payments, those kinds of things are already going to put you in that position where you are not going to have to show any assets on that FAFSA form. So a good chunk of the families I work with are not showing any assets on their FAFSA, regardless of how much they actually have in college savings. But my family, like I'm going to guess a few of your families, are earning more than $60,000 a year. So what happens if you're in that boat? Are they counting everything? What are they counting? How are they counting it? So first, no, they are not counting all of our possessions. And in fact, for most Mainers, the things that give us the majority of our wealth are automatically excluded from the federal formula for financial aid. So any of your possessions, your cars, your boats, your anything you owned, it doesn't go into the FAFSA form. Your primary residence, the home you live in, does not get counted as an asset on the FAFSA, and neither do your retirement accounts. So 401ks, 403bs, IRAs, pension plans, none of that goes in the FAFSA form. So once you take out the retirement plans and the home and your cars, how much do you have left, right? So first, these things are never looked at, automatically excluded. So what are those countable assets? So countable assets are going to be things like whatever money is in your bank account. So checking account, savings account, cash on hand. Anything that is an investment that is not in retirement accounts. So if you have stocks and bonds or mutual funds that are not in qualified retirement accounts, you would count those. If you have investment properties like second homes or camps or rental properties, you're going to put the equity value of those into the form as well. So if you've got these countable assets, and I will say in my own scenario, we own a family camp. So it's been passed down through the generations. We never could have afforded that camp on our own, but we own half of it at this moment. So it will go into that FAFSA form. So is it going to hurt us, right? And this is something we've talked about a lot in our household. First, the reality is, even at the maximum, so when you start looking at all of those countable assets, the most they are going to impact a student's financial aid eligibility is that they are going to consider that 5.64% of them would be available to help that student pay for college. But that only happens if you are already in the highest earning tax brackets. So the lower your annual income is, the less the percentage that they are going to look at those assets, right? So smaller. So here is going to show you kind of an example of that. So first, this is, again, where we have a family, the same family of four. In this case, they are all making $100,000 a year. Okay, so they're all making the same, they're all looking at the same number of assets, or the same percentage of their assets being counted. In this scenario, the first family, scenario A, that family has $0 in assets. And we can see that the only contribution that family has got so far is from parent income of $9,311. Scenario B, now we've got $10,000 in savings. It's not huge, but it's a really nice start to, covering some of those college costs. It impacts the student's financial aid eligibility by $480. $10,000 in savings, and it only impacts $480. So let's go up $25,000 in savings, puts you at $1,200 impact, and $50,000 in savings impacts that student's financial aid eligibility by less than $2,500. So, and certainly if you have $50,000 in college savings, that is going to make a giant difference in the choices that student is going to have when it comes time to pay for college. So in addition to parent income and parent assets, they do also look at student income and student assets. I know it's not on this slide, but I will say students can earn about $8,000 a year, and the federal government is not going to look at it. So students, go and get a job. But once you get that job, you want to think about how you are saving that money. So if you are in one of those households where they're not counting any of your assets at all, you can put that money wherever you want. You can put it in your own bank account because they're not counting parent assets and they're not counting student assets. But if they are counting household assets, student savings does have a higher impact on financial aid eligibility. And so typically they are looking at 20% of any dollar a student has in their name being available to help them pay for college. And so in this case, we say students, a couple thousand, no big deal. If you got more than that, think about where else that money can be. Those 529s that are our college savings accounts that we're going to talk a little bit more about, parents are typically the owners of those accounts, not the student. So students, you can put your money into those college savings accounts and they don't show up as your asset, and they are looked at the smaller rate that parent assets are looked at. And parents, you only have to claim the 529 account that you have for that one student you are filing the FAFSA for, not all of the siblings. So that is one of the great changes that we got this year in the FAFSA. And one last tip before Mary kicks me out of the presentation for a little bit is grandparents can also be the owner of the account. And in that scenario, it doesn't show up on the FAFSA form at all. So just something to think about when you're thinking about where the student's money could be if they're a great student who has lots of cash in their name.
Awesome, Jess. Thank you so much. So as I said in the beginning, you saw the actual calculations and, so that whole myth. And I think sometimes the best intended relatives, neighbors, friends, they'll sometimes provide you with advice about financial aid and things that they want you to know. And that savings myth, I think, comes up frequently. We hear families say, well, my neighbor or my friend said, it impacted them negatively. But what really ends up happening is the families, as Jess said, who have the greatest capacity to save, they tend to have the higher income. And so it's that income that has driven their eligibility, not the savings. But our perception ends up being that it's because we saved. So I think hopefully those calculations give you more confidence in knowing what the true impact is and the number of families that we work with who don't have to report assets at all. So that's a really big part of it as well. Now, I didn't mention in the beginning, but if you have questions or comments or anything that you want to share, feel free to use the chat. Jess will keep an eye on that as we go through. We just have a few more slides to, really talk a little bit about savings and some strategies that you can use. But if you have questions about the things that she just went over or anything else, please comment in the chat and we can address those as we go through. So I know, we all know that we need to be saving and focusing on saving, but of course, taking the steps to do that can be challenging. Things are increasingly more expensive, whether it's housing costs, groceries, all of our expenses continue to increase. And so savings can be difficult. And so some of the tips we want to share are, strategies to help you get started, where to begin, kind of some rules of thumb. So really the first step is to make a plan. So, it's one thing to say, I need to save for this, I need to set aside savings for college or retirement. But until you really step back and make a plan for savings and prioritize your savings goals, it's unlikely that you're going to be successful. So really making a plan is that key first step to being successful and getting some money set aside for various savings goals. So, where to begin? One of the things that we recommend first and foremost is to begin to build an emergency fund, to have some emergency savings set aside. One of the things that, as you look at data, whether it's nationally or here in Maine, even with our employee financial wellness programs, emergency savings is a place where most Mainers really struggle. We might be diverting money into our retirement account, perhaps saving for college, but that immediate emergency savings is an area that we all have room for improvement. So if you feel, if you're in a situation where you don't have any emergency savings set aside, you are not alone. And what we recommend is that try not to get too overwhelmed by, financial experts who give you the recommendation of, 3 to 6 months of expenses. That can be overwhelming. And so we encourage you to start small. Even if it's a small savings goal, whether you're talking about yourself or your child or students that you're working with, starting with a goal of $500 and then reaching that goal and building upon it from there. So moving on to $1,000, $2,000, and then ideally sort of that holy grail of savings is the 3 to 6 months. Really that space to allow you time should an emergency occur, whether it's a health issue or you lose your job or there's a reduction in income. You really want to have a buffer and some time to be able to recover from that setback. So that's where that 3 to 6 months comes from. One of the questions that we often get when we talk about savings, whether it's college savings, retirement savings, people want to know how much. What is the rule of thumb? Again, that sort of goal is to have 20% of your income being set aside for savings. But again, that's not realistic for many individuals and families. And so what we encourage you to do is just to start small and build upon whatever place you are at and know that you can incrementally increase your contributions to savings over time. So again, part of that plan isn't just about how much you're going to save, but what are you going to be saving for? And so again, prioritizing the emergency fund, then really focusing on retirement savings. From there, if you have children or grandchildren, is there an opportunity for you to set aside college savings? And then, of course, large purchases, whether it's, a future, purchase of a car, a home, a vacation, some of those larger purchases. And, you really want to think about that and those types of savings as separate from your emergency savings. Part of the plan, as you're setting those goals, you want to set realistic and attainable goals. There's nothing more challenging as you're trying to reach the goals is if you've set goals that are hard to achieve, because then you're not going to be motivated, to continue. So again, setting that small savings goal and then building upon it as time allows. And then a big one is to get your family involved in this conversation. I know Jess and I both, as parents, and as having a spouse, and we're hopefully all working together towards the same goal. So getting the entire family on board with that plan and what you're focusing on, and helping them to understand that, there are places where you may be cutting back on spending to be able to reach those savings goals. And the more involvement that you have among family members, the more buy-in, the more likely you are to be successful. And then the last bullet there, boy, this is one I struggle with myself. It's one thing to make a plan, but and even implementing the plan isn't necessarily the challenge for me, but reviewing it, refining it, and adjusting it over time as things change. And so that's a big part of it. I have one child who has finished college and now he's working. I have another child who's a senior, and it's been challenging to readjust my college savings goals over time to address the needs of one child versus two. So just really thinking about, you can't set it and forget it with your savings planning and your savings goals, because things will change, your income will change, priorities are going to change. So it's really important that you refine and regroup and adjust the plan as needed. See if I can advance my own slides here. So the other challenge, again, as I said earlier, things are more expensive. It costs more to live and to pay for housing and utilities. So where do you find the money to save? If you're working with individuals in particular who are living paycheck to paycheck, it can be really difficult to, promote savings and encourage them to save when you know that they're really struggling to meet those everyday expenses. So these are some of the tips that we, think can be very effective in discovering sort of found money, money within your day-to-day income to help set aside and boost your savings. The first thing is to track your spending. There's no way to sort of get around this. You really should take the time, at least over the course of a week or 2 weeks, ideally for an entire month or longer, to track every penny that you spend and figure out where your money is going. Often, for most of us, virtually, all adults, we have spending leaks, and there is money potentially being spent on things that aren't aligned with our financial goals. So I saw that Steve Couts, our financial education specialist, is on the Zoom. And one of the things he is really focusing on right now is talking with adults and consumers about their streaming services, for example. So how we all signed up for that, Netflix or Hulu or whatever it is, because we wanted to watch the latest season of that show, but then we forget to suspend that subscription. So that's one area that, as you look at your spending leaks and you look at your day-to-day spending, where are the places that you can cut back and divert that spending into savings? So think about, your daily, I hate to say daily coffee because I think coffee gets a bad rap. But perhaps you are someone that has the daily or multiple times a day Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts. Could you cut back and divert some of that? Again, subscriptions, that monthly payment mindset that we get caught up in. Meals out, fast food. I know as we look at and talk with college students, that's a common spending leak. That's an area that they really struggle with. Those quick counter service meals, meals out, those sorts of things. Think about that. Downloads, subscriptions, kids, right? They are really a big source of spending leaks. Every time you walk into Target or Walmart and they're throwing things into the cart. So by tracking your spending, you'll really get a handle on where your money is going, where your money's going. We know when we make those big purchases or we pay those big bills, for example, our rent, our mortgage, our car payment, those big things. But the smaller purchases that add up and collectively become a big purchase can sometimes be a great source of potential savings. Of course, creating a budget, once you get a handle on where your money's going, creating a budget and monitoring your spending and adjusting your budget over time. Again, this is a plan for your money and for your spending. And so the more that you do that and you monitor your spending, the more successful you'll be in being able to set aside money for savings. And as I said, that found money, get it into a savings account. Also, you want to take a look at maximizing any additional found money like tax refunds, pay increases, or other available funds, whether it's, in the case of, young adults or children, gifts that they may receive, money that becomes available to them at birthday time, that sort of thing. But really think about those opportunities where new money becomes available. So a big example of this in my life, and I know for many, is you get that car paid off, right? So you've got a car payment, and then all of a sudden, the car's finally paid off, and you think, oh, great, I'm going to have, an extra 3 or 4 or $500, whatever your car payment is, extra a month. Won't that be great? But if you don't make a plan for that found money, all of a sudden, it's as if you don't have that extra 4 or 500. Where it's going, one can only tell unless you're tracking that daily spending. So that's a place where, again, as you discover found money, making sure you take the steps to divert that into a savings account is a key step in the process. Other tips for success, and this is a big one for me as well, creating a savings account that I don't have access to. Certainly not linking it to your debit card. Some consumers even go so far as having it in a separate account with a separate financial institution, really not linking it at all to their day-to-day spending. Automating contributions, this is a huge benefit. In some ways, this, unlike the subscription services, set it and forget it on savings can be a really good strategy. In automating, whether it's payroll deduction, or however you want to automate those contributions, that's going to really ensure that you're making consistent contributions into a savings account. And then make sure that you're taking advantage of savings matches. I'm not going to get into the details of, our 529 plan here in Maine, the Next Gen program. We have several other presentations that are available for viewing on that, but there are matching grants available. And so really maximizing and increasing your savings through those matches can be very effective in building up savings. If your employer offers a match for retirement savings and retirement contributions, at a minimum, whatever minimum contribution that you need to make to maximize that match, you want to make sure that you do that. That's free money. That's money that will help you build that savings account. And, you absolutely want to take advantage of that. Exploring high yield savings options. So this is one that now, in this interest rate environment and with all of the online options where you can choose different banks, even with your own existing financial institution, looking at other ways to save. There was a time that when you put money into a savings account, you weren't going to earn much interest. But right now, that's not the case. So whether it's CDs or other high yield options, I encourage you to explore that. And if you are unsure where to turn, start with your, existing relationship that you have with your financial institution. And then there are a lot of great resources online to help you as well. But start local, start with whomever you're doing your banking with at this time. So some other things that we want to talk about, just general overview of types of savings and ways or places to save. We talked about savings goals and different ways to focus your savings. You want to be thinking about short-term and long-term savings. That short-term, as we talked about, those emergency funds, that large purchases that you want to make, vacations, sort of those general savings options. Flexible spending accounts, again, if this is something, or a health savings account, something that you have access to either through your employer or in the case of an HSA, if that's something that you have access to, I encourage you to do your research and explore that as well. And then in terms of long-term savings, you really want to prioritize and emphasize your retirement savings. There are many different ways to do that, whether it's through your employer or independently through an IRA or a Roth IRA. And then college savings. Again, if you have a child or a grandchild that you're saving for, having a plan to set aside money into a college savings account is going to make a big difference. And like I said in the beginning, in terms of, how much should I have saved? There's a lot of calculators out there on the college savings side that will help you forecast how much money you're going to need to be able to pay for college. Those are wonderful tools, but I think can sometimes be very intimidating. We encounter very few families in the work that we do who are able to save every single penny that they're going to need for college for their child or grandchild. Um, but every penny does make a difference. So as much and to the extent possible that you can set aside money into a college savings account, it is going to make a difference, even if it's only $1,000 or a smaller amount. Very few families are able to meet the full cost through college savings and instead are using a piecemeal approach. And that really works for most families, and it was a very effective way of approaching higher ed expenses for us. So in terms of ways to save, we talked about many of these. Start locally, start with your bank or your credit union. A lot of those institutions have experts who will work with you, financial coaches or individuals that will work with you to create a plan, whether it's a budget or a plan for savings. As I said, increasingly many consumers are banking online and with financial institutions that they don't actually have brick and mortar where they're going to the bank and engaging in that way. But that's a very effective way of creating, a way to save. Again, your retirement accounts, I think talking or, talking with your employer or becoming aware of what your employer offers, especially those matches. And then 529 accounts, FAME is a great place to start to learn about ways to save through the 529 program that we administer. We have a ton of information available at famemaine.com, and we actually employ 2 full-time college savings counselors. So Jess is really focused on the FAFSA and financial aid and college access counseling, but we actually have 2 full-time people who will do one-on-ones with you to figure out a plan for saving in a 529. So not only will they work with you, but if you're an employer who's joined us today, they will come in and work with your employees as well. So don't hesitate to reach out to us to inquire about that opportunity. So some additional resources, to kind of help you get started. We want you to be aware of a tool that we have purchased for the entire state of Maine. It's called Enrich, and it's an online financial education tool. You can access it at fame.enrich.org. And again, it's 100% free. You sign up for it and you're not going to be bombarded by third-party marketing and sales pitches because, again, we've paid for it on behalf of Maine. Enrich has a ton of resources around savings. There are actual courses that you can complete to help you learn about ways to save and increase your knowledge of savings options. There are tools and calculators, a savings calculator, a budget tool, retirement savings calculator. So we strongly encourage you to check out Enrich. There's also a version for high school and college students called iGrad that we have also purchased. So you can access that at fame.igrad.com. And again, the tools are more geared toward young adults and, again, high school, college age. So you can check that out as well. But we encourage you because those online tools can, again, help bolster some of your knowledge and improve some of your financial behaviors. As I've said over and over and over, check with your bank or local credit union, whoever you're already having, you have an established relationship with. Talk with your HR department, your employer, find out what is available to you in terms of matches on the retirement side or other options that you have available. If you have the capacity to do so, talk to a financial coach or an expert that can help you make a plan, whether it's a full financial plan or a plan to save. That's another great place or way to sort of improve your success. As I said, many credit unions and banks across the state have financial experts and financial coaches that will meet you with you free of charge. So that isn't necessarily something you always have to pay for. And as always, you can reach out to us to find out how to get started and how to begin to build a plan for savings. And then I want to give a shout out to New Ventures Maine. They have a ton of wonderful, not only financial coaching, but courses, savings, match savings accounts and opportunities. So if you're not familiar with all of the programs that they offer, please check out New Ventures Maine as well. And I think that brings us to the conclusion. Um, Jess, any questions at all in the chat or anything
Nothing,
that?
nothing big there. We had one that kind of popped up and then disappeared. So I think somebody changed their mind about asking.
Okay,
But I thought this was great, and I think it's important for us to, to reiterate. It doesn't have to be a huge thing, right? We're not saying, because I think sometimes families think, well, if I'm not saving $500 a month for my kid, it's, what's the point? And the reality is, every little bit makes a difference. Having an extra $1,000 when they head off to college can make a difference about what they're able, what choices they're able to make, how successful they feel when they get started. So, every little bit counts. And students, again, they can earn $8,000 a year and it's not going to impact financial aid. They can save too. So,
absolutely, absolutely,
great ways to bring them. And I will say, working with my own, high school students, it matters more to them now, and the idea that, oh, I could live on campus if I had this little extra bit, right? And so, those things can make a difference. Absolutely.
absolutely. And I think with teenagers and young adults, I think that planning part of it is huge because, you know, we encounter and work with a lot of teens and young adults. They're working, they're absolutely working in the summer and they're wanting to earn money. But making a plan for those earnings so that they are setting aside, they're great at earning, but not always great at saving and having that set aside. So helping them to make a plan can be very helpful in that process as well because if they know that they've set aside whether it's 20% or whatever they can set aside into that savings account to help contribute to higher education expenses, that's just going to build confidence and give them an opportunity to build on that as they enter adulthood. So um, great tips. uh, Thank you so much, Jess, for this today. This has been wonderful. Thank you all so much for
Right.
joining us. Again, this concludes our financial check-in series, which again, it's May. I can't believe it. But as I said at the beginning, we will kick off again in August. All of the sessions are recorded, and so we will distribute this one to you as well. And keep an eye out for the new calendar because we're really excited about the topics that we've got coming to you for next year.
Excellent. Well, thanks for having me, Mary, and have a
Thank
wonderful
you.
summer, everybody.